Today I'm going to talk about whether the United States is a Christian nation or not. And I want to open this discussion, or this topic, with a little bit of a news piece that's happened recently, and that the Roman Catholic bishops have said that politicians who don't toe the party line and vote in accordance with the Vatican teachings are going to be denied communion in the church. And this has caused a little bit of a stir, partly because they seem to raise this flag when John Kerry started becoming more on the political scene. So Kerry's sort of been the lightning rod for this whole thing. And there's various levels of what's going on here, right? At the topmost level, it's the Catholic Church has these communion wafers, and by analogy, we might say, well, we have some cookies here, and I can decide to give Ashely a cookie or not, and they're my cookies, so it's certainly my decision whether I do that or not. But there's more to it than that. At a deeper level, these communion wafers, or the sacrament of communion, or the communion sacrament, is in a sense kind of necessary for someone to ascend to heaven. So in a sense, the denying communion is taking away someone's chances of getting to heaven, right? It's a big deal. And heaven is like eternal bliss for all time, right? So that's like an infinite reward. So, what would you do for an infinite reward?
Versus infinite punishment.
Versus infinite punishment, right? So by golly, somebody's more than likely going to want to trade their vote for an infinite reward. I'd certainly, yes, there's a lot of these scams from Nigeria floating around the internet promising big rewards, but if you're a true believer, then this is a big deal. So in effect, we have the Catholic Church or the bishops and such, in a sense, controlling the vote, which is problematic in my opinion. Still, you could argue that the Catholic Church is a club, and they have these rules, or the creed or whatever, and people need to follow the creed, and I can see that as well.
Do you know actually how much that is being enforced by the actual priests who are in charge at that particular?
It seems to vary a lot. I think some of the priests are quite serious about it, and actually picking out the politicians, and I think many of them have realized that it's kind of a practical problem, because not only do they have to keep track of who's a politician, but they also have to keep track of how they're voting and all this. Yeah. Right, so they're kind of, I think, getting the politicians themselves to censor themselves. But I think a more insidious thing in that is that, if I wield power over a politician, then in effect I'm influencing much more than just that person. I'm influencing all of the people that are influenced by that person, right? So if we have people being unable to get contraceptives, for example, or unable to exercise their right to have an abortion, and lots of other things that the Catholic Church speaks against, then in effect you're taking away the free will of people who may not even be Catholics. Yeah. And I do have a problem with that. I think that's a bad thing. Yeah.
Not to actually get on a tangent or anything, but they had that problem here in Austin with I believe it was Seton Hospital, or was it Brackenridge? Or are they the same thing?
I can't remember. But one of the hospitals is controlled by the Catholic Church.
Exactly.
Right?
The Catholic Church actually won the bid on that. They started the hospital. Mm-hmm. A couple of years later, the Catholic Church came out and said, okay, no more abortions, no more birth control, no more family planning, no more anything like that. The church had to follow, therefore the hospital had to follow. Therefore, the hospital stopped giving out any form of birth control, any form of contraception, any form of anything like that. And so the city, to get around this, actually had to sell out the 5th floor of the building and say, this is not part of the hospital. This is now a different hospital
providing the complementary services, right?
And we have to duplicate all our services. So you've actually got to sign in twice when you go into the building for 2 different hospitals. You've got to get services from one, and then maybe you have to go to a different floor to get services from the other. And it's just this huge mess. It's costing everybody so much money, because now they have to open up a second hospital.
Yeah.
Just because somebody said, okay, no more condoms. So.
Right. So I think the upshot of this discussion is the Catholic Church has a lot of influence, and in fact, they're a sovereign nation. The Vatican is a sovereign nation, and so we have another nation coming in meddling with U.S. politics and health services and all sorts of things in the United States. And Saddam Hussein was a bad guy, but he didn't have the kahunas to come in and muck with the United States like the Vatican's doing. So. I don't know. Thomas Jefferson had a really good quote that's very apropos here. He said, history, I believe, furnishes no example of a priest-ridden people maintaining a free civil government. This marks the lowest grade of ignorance which their civil as well as religious leaders will always avail themselves to their own purposes. So that seems very appropriate. So the question is, well, if the United States is a Christian nation, then this is not a big deal because the Catholic Church is arguably kind of a hub of Christian belief. Maybe it's all okay. Maybe it's okay. We certainly have a lot of Christians in the United States. We have 77% in a 2001 poll declare themselves Christian. But I think more interestingly, the United States is one of the most religiously diverse nations in the world. And so we have a lot of diversity, a lot of different people. So there's a number of people who have taken a stand on this Christian nation idea. And let me read you some quotes. Judge Moore, who is an Alabama former Supreme Court justice in Alabama. Yeah, we're already cringing. The infamous Ten Commandments judge said, America is a Judeo-Christian nation founded by Christians, and that the foundation of American law is the Bible and the Ten Commandments. So he said that. I don't believe it, but he said that. Pat Robertson says, the separation of church and state is a lie of the left, that there's no such thing. Jerry Falwell says, the idea that religion and politics don't mix was invented by the devil to keep Christians from running their own country. So
wow. Okay.
Pretty strong statement, right? John Ashcroft, Attorney General John Ashcroft, told the graduates of Bob Jones University that America has no king but Jesus.
Yep, no king.
No king.
We just cut it off earlier, that's all.
We've got a couple more here. Florida televangelist James Kennedy touted the standard Christian nation viewpoint. He said, as Christians, we should prefer and select Christians to rule over us. We would have far less trouble if we did. General William Boykin, who is infamous for being a general, but well, can you help me out here?
That was relatively recently. He had said something about talking about Islam and this whole war. We are fighting for Jesus Christ, and those other gods over there are lesser than our God.
Right. The Muslims are worshiping an idol, of course.
Yeah.
The Muslim God and the Christian God and the Jewish God are all the same.
My God's bigger than your God argument.
Yeah. So he said, fighting a spiritual enemy. That our country is a Christian nation fighting a spiritual enemy that will only be defeated if we come against him in the name of Jesus, and that the enemy is a guy called Satan. And the terrorists are attacking us because we're a Christian nation. So he certainly believes we're a Christian nation.
Yeah.
And Chief Justice Anton Scalia said, God has the power of life and death, therefore governments who derive their power from God have the right to dispense life and death too.
Wow.
That's a scary quote,
isn't it? That's a little bit scary.
Yeah. Okay, so we have a lot of folks that seem to think, we have a Christian nation here. That not only do we have a nation of Christians, but we have a nation that is run by Christian belief. So is that true? And the answer is no. And what's going on is there's kind of a myth being created, a myth being promoted and pushed out. And the myth is basically the idea that the United States was founded as a Christian nation. And that these religious values, the Christianity is under attack in the United States, so they can be not only the majority, but they can also be the persecuted so they can cry persecution at the same time, which is a very, very good trick.
Yeah, they often flip that coin as in saying, we have 77% of the population, therefore what we say goes. But then 2 weeks later, we are being so persecuted, and the ACLU is out there winning everything, and we are being stomped out of everywhere, and now we can't pray in our schools, therefore we need the special protection.
Right, and they often distort.
You've got to pick one.
Okay. Another part of this is that the danger is that without faith in God in America, we'll lose His blessing, right? And bad things will happen to us. So we need to protect our nation's religious heritage. This is kind of the mindset that's being promoted. And I would claim, I'm going to claim that the Christian nation idea is false. That we are a secular nation. We have a lot of Christians. We have a lot of other religions as well. And not only that, what's especially important, I think, is the founding documents of the United States, the belief of the founders, what they were trying to do. All of that is very clear, and it's been distorted by a lot of people along the way. So. So the goal is Americans United, Barry Lynn has said, is to erode the vitality of the church-state separation principle in order to Christianize the United States. So the real story is the United States was founded not on religion but on a deep distrust of religion. The founding fathers came from countries they saw firsthand. Some of the abuses of religion. The Catholic Church in England was not well respected. They were very concerned about the abuse of power there. Before the founding of the United States, we had the Salem witch trials and all sorts of other abuses, and they were wise to conclude that the founding fathers or that the source of a lot of these problems was religion itself, and that if you mix the religion with the power of the state, you really had problems. So there was this need to, in effect, keep a balance, a separation of powers between those. And this is not just church-state separation. They actually had a lot of ideas, a lot of related ideas. For example, they wanted to have within the government, they had the checks and balances of the executive branch, the legislative branch, and the judicial branch, and they were all checks and balances on each other. And it's the same idea in a different area where you have different groups that if one gets too powerful, the others can pull them down and keep them in check. Yeah. They were also very concerned about the corporations gaining too much power and controlling the United States. They thought that the free press was very important. And as a yet another checks and balance. So all of these things were part of the genesis of the United States, and these are very important principles by which our government was formed. And at the time, it was a very novel government, although it's been many of the themes that we came up with, or that our founding fathers came up with, have been duplicated in other constitutions and such. So those are really the themes. It's not Christianity, but freedom of religion, freedom to practice your religion or not practice religion, and freedom to the state shouldn't be meddling in that, and vice versa. Religion shouldn't be controlling the state. So, and we as atheists are very, very big on this. This is like one of our big things is that we want to keep the church and state separate because. That sort of is best for everybody. Okay, so the founding fathers were mostly deists. So deism, for those in the audience that are not familiar with that, that's kind of it's been called the absentee landlord religion, in the sense that it's the idea that there is an all-powerful God who created the universe, and that's it. He disappeared after that. He doesn't listen to prayers. He didn't communicate to people with the Bible. He isn't no Jesus, none of that stuff. So deism is kind of the very
hands-off God.
Hands-off God, and they often use the term creator or natural God is the kind of phrase that you'll see in a lot of the early documents referring to this God, and. I claim it's a pretty benign thing. George Washington was a deist, Ben Franklin, Ethan Allen, Thomas Paine, Thomas Jefferson, James Monroe. A very famous deist was Thomas Paine, who wrote The Age of Reason, where he criticized this idea that the Bible had any truth to it, as some sort of mystic thing, and was actually pretty unpopular after doing that, and was called an atheist, even though he was a deist. So, this begs the question: why would people of one religion create a country for another religion, right? Why would deists go create a country and make it a Christian country? That doesn't make any sense at all. And I have lots of quotes here, and we can maybe do those later when we have callers, a little bit later. About the feelings of Jefferson and Madison, who were the primary architects of the Constitution, Madison especially, but we can skip those. But I'll just say that in summary, these guys wanted a separation of church and state, and they were very clear about that. And so we have in our Constitution, which is our founding document, we have the First Amendment that says that Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof. And then there's lots of other clauses, but those are the clauses relevant to this. Article 6 of the Constitution says in part that let's see. I'll just go ahead and read it. The senators and representatives before mentioned and the members of the state of legislatures and all executive and judicial officers, both in the United States and of the several states, shall be bound by an oath of affirmation to support this Constitution, but no religious test shall be required as a qualification to any office or public trust in the United States. So there's no test of public office. Although it's interesting to note that the Texas Constitution has a test of we have to believe in God to become. But that's been overruled by the U.S. Constitution, because the U.S. Constitution takes precedence.
It's Texas. There's actually several states that have that in there, that if you're going to become within the government of the state for some reason, you have to take this oath saying, I swear under God, or something like that. And that is the legally required oath that you must take. Now, it's still in the books technically, just because I believe it has been challenged, and it has been ruled unconstitutional. It's just still in the books. I think it's just one of these unenforceable rules that's sitting there. Exactly. Like, can't shoot buffalo from a second-story window or something like that.
So should we change our First Amendment to our Constitution, that might become in effect again. So that's there. But I doubt that will ever happen. I hope that never happens. Okay. Well, what about the claim that the U.S. laws are based on the Ten Commandments? Well, that's false as well, as it turns out. In fact, this is such an old chestnut, an old myth, that even old Thomas Jefferson himself had to try to defeat that. He spoke against that. The truth is that our laws are based on British common law, which in turn were influenced by Romans and such, Roman law. But if you go back, these laws were all in effect, and all of the sort of main laws that we have were all in place before Christianity even reached Britain. So
Hammurabi's Code, I believe, is actually one of the earliest documents, at least that I've heard
one of the earliest codified laws.
Yes. Yeah, and that was well before any Christianity existed.
Right. So these things like killing and stealing and all that have all been part of these laws. So, what about the Pledge of Allegiance and the motto and some of these things? And the "In God We Trust" and the currency. Well, these are all added in the 50s during the Cold War, when we were trying to distinguish ourselves from those godless commies. You know, so we're better than them because we believe in God, and so we plastered this all sorts of places, but. The pledge, as most of our readers know, I think, or most of our listeners know, that originally didn't mention under God at all, and it was added in the 50s. Anyway, where does all this come from? Where would this Christian nation idea come from? Given that history pretty clearly tells us that's not the case. Well, I think that we have kind of a little bit of wishful thinking going on here. That's one thing going on, but we have this this is kind of a Protestant myth. I think it comes from this Protestant ethic that if you are successful in your life, that's a sign that God has smiled on you and God likes you.
Okay.
So if you have success in life and you believe that you're saved, that means that you have God's blessing. So by contrast, if you're poor and unsuccessful, and then you need to be saved. You need to be embrace God, because He'll bless you. And I think this is the source of our compassionate conservatism and our faith-based charity initiatives. But if you scale this up, if we have a successful nation, that means that God has blessed that nation, right? And several places in the Bible it mentions that basically God controls or chooses the leaders of nations. So I personally don't believe that. We have a democracy here. So
we have chosen.
So maybe God is in there influencing lots of different people, pulling the levers or pushing the buttons, as it is these days.
And many right now would even argue that we vote for them.
Right.
Given the last election and the hubbub that happened over that.
So, and one of the problems with this belief in God's blessing is it's a slippery slope into power hungry and greediness, right? Power hungriness, all right? Because if we have more money, that even means God likes us more, and so on, and it kind of is a positive feedback loop, and then we can go destroy other countries and say, well, God let us do it. So based on this Christian nation idea, and now we're getting to kind of the meat of why I think this is important, is that this Christian nation myth or idea is the basis of a lot of bad things that the United States is doing. And let me kind of go through them, and then in maybe a few minutes we'll open up the phone for callers. So maybe we can put the phone up and take some calls after this. Okay, first off, we have our commander-in-chief has kind of a messiah complex going on right now. He believes that he has been chosen by God and that his whims are God's holy command. And I think that's very dangerous. He has said as much that I believe God wants me to be president. He's said that. He's also reported to have said, although it's not a direct quote, he is reported to have said, God told me to strike at the Al-Qaeda, and I struck them. And then he instructed me to strike at Saddam, which I did, and now I'm determined to solve the problem in the Middle East. So that's pretty scary stuff. There's a feeling by a lot of religious leaders that 9/11 was caused by those who have left, who don't believe in God, the 9/11 attack. Jerry Falwell has claimed that he blamed us for throwing God out of the public square. That the abortionists have got to bear some of the burden for this because God will not be mocked. And when we destroy 40 million little innocent babies, we make God mad. I really believe that the pagans, the abortionists, and the feminists, and the gays, and the lesbians who are actively trying to make an alternative lifestyle, the ACLU, People for the American Way, all of them have tried to secularize America. I point the finger in their face and I say, you helped make this happen. So that's the feeling, is that God has no longer blessed us.
Lifted his veil of protection.
Right. We're seeing a lot of empire building where Bush has said our nation has been chosen by God and commissioned by history to be a model of justice before the world. So we're supposed to go out and bring worship to God to the rest of the world and make them just like us, which unfortunately has fallen flat on its face. I hope recently with the abuses in the Abu Ghraib prison in Iraq. It's pretty horrible stuff. Bush has also said we must remember that our calling as a blessed nation to make the world better and confound the designs of evil men. So he's made this thing that the United States is good, therefore everybody else is bad. And Cheney has said America has the duty to act with force to construct a world in the image of the United States. So, and we've got to have all this discussion about evildoers and all that, and God is on our side, and it's just kind of like the it reminds me of the belt buckles that the German stormtroopers used to wear, and the Nazi stormtroopers. You know, God mit uns. God is on our side. You know, pretty creepy stuff. We have stopped enforcing the Geneva Conventions for POWs for people who we call terrorists, and in our definition of terrorist, whoever that may be, whoever we decide is a terrorist, we don't enforce the Geneva Conventions for that, and I think that's very very scary. In the wake of the Iraqi war, 8,000 evangelicals were all ready to go to Iraq to convert the heathen. But they finally thought better of that, and it might look like more of a religious war than it really is.
Yeah.
So we have this sort of world domination theme going on. We have the sabotage of the constitutional in the United States and the government checks and balances. These are very disconcerting things. We have right now 5 bills being considered by Congress to limit the power of the courts. One bill has 50 sponsors, called the Safeguarding Our Religious Liberties Act. Another one is called the Ten Commandments Defense Act. And all of these bills have the idea that, oh, well, the judiciary can't rule on anything having to do with promotion of God, even if it is on the public square or whatever. Yeah. And furthermore, we're going to impeach any of the justices that try to make such a ruling.
Yes.
So it's kind of it's very very scary that these people
would sanely propose this.
Yeah. One bill has 50 sponsors and one has 116. I think this is traitorous. I think this is active destruction of our Constitution. So I'm very upset by this. We have the Patriot Act, which is pretty horrible, undermining a lot of search and seizure laws. We have the First Amendment, the separation of church and state, no longer really being enforced by the Attorney General Ashcroft. So it's pretty scary stuff. Let's see. We have patriotism being associated with Christian belief. We have the Christian Coalition claiming that we should take America back, that they used to own somehow America, and somehow it slipped out of their fingers, and now they have to take it back, this sort of siege mentality, which is not really true. They never had it to begin with. We have the promotion of ignorance in areas where faith is relevant. We have reproductive rights, and one of my favorites is condoms being labeled ineffective by some government websites when that's not true. Stem cell research is being banned. So all of this is okay if we have a Christian nation. So in a sense, this Christian nation thing is kind of a stepping stone to bigger and uglier things. So I've gone through a lot of stuff pretty quickly. One interesting group is a group called Christian Exodus that has decided that the United States is not a Christian nation, but they think that they should have one. So what their group is doing is they're getting together a whole bunch of people, and they're committing to move to a particular state. They're all going to descend on one state, and they've chosen South Carolina as that state. And the idea is that they're going to have enough mass there, enough people there, that they're going to basically well, I would say hijack, but they would say something else. Hijack the government there, and then eventually secede from the United States and become a Christian nation. So,
well, oddly enough, it's just linking up in my head now. South Carolina, the former co-host on this show a while back, before I was on it, is David Clark. He went to a Bible school, and he was actually studying to be a minister. And it was in Bible school, essentially, that he had some questions and things like that. He couldn't get good answers to it, so he eventually became an atheist. Eventually started co-hosting this show.
Well, he's going to hell for sure. Go ahead, I'm sorry.
Well, in more than one sense. He took a different job and moved to, of all the places, South Carolina.
Oh, I'm sorry.
And I know when he was leaving, he was talking about possibly trying to get a cable access show and see what was happening there.
Okay.
So
I wish him well.
That would be very funny.
Okay.
They'll have to fight the old co-host of the Atheist Experience if they want their Christian nation.
Right, right. Yeah, and we'll accept callers. We don't have to. You don't have to be on topic for this. You can call about any atheism question you want.
Exactly. Right. Any questions?
Separation of church and state. We're pretty fond of that.
Yeah.
Let's see. We had Pat Robertson declare that Bush has told him that God has told him that Bush will win in a landslide. So we have the big guy telling Pat. So why bother voting? I mean, what's the point of democracy? What's the point of pulling our levers in the voting booth if God has already decided that, right?
Yeah. And what happens if he doesn't win in a landslide? What if it's just another close election, or he loses?
Yeah, it must have been that he didn't quite hear it right or something. I don't know.
At what point do we say that this is the definition of a landslide?
Right.
God must do it in these. It must be a statistically significant margin.
Right, right.
Actually, I had an email. This was several months back. A friend of mine's uncle or something like that had emailed them and promoted the idea of a Christian nation, saying, here's several quotes by our founding fathers saying, we love the Bible and Jesus was our source of inspiration, and all these other quotes that they have out there. Mm-hmm. And basically, came to the conclusion that this is a nation by for Christians. And so
it's certainly easy to find evidence for that viewpoint or supporting quotes, that sort of thing. Right.
And so I emailed back, and I did this mostly as an exercise. She'd emailed it to me privately, just saying, thought you might get a kick out of this or something like that. And so I replied to it mostly as a mental exercise and do some research. And I sent it back to her, and I started out saying that we can play
the quote
supporting
game, right?
Quote game if you want. Mm-hmm. But that's kind of a red herring, because regardless of what the original founding fathers intended or thought should happen, doesn't necessarily mean that they were right. Some of them supported slavery, not giving women the right to vote, things like that. Just because they necessarily said something doesn't make it right.
Well, and things are not set in stone. I mean, one of the beautiful things about our Constitution is it can be amended.
Yes.
And if something is wrong and enough people, you need a big majority to do this, then it can change. So it's an evolving document, which is one of its great things.
Yeah. And so I basically went off on the whole tangent that we have religious freedoms in this country. You can be religious, you can be any religion you want, or you can be not religious, and that is a good thing both for religions and for government. It's good for everybody involved, essentially. Mm-hmm. And so everybody likes the idea that this is a Christian nation or this is a religious nation, assuming it's their very specific brand of religion. Christianity covers everything from, you've got the evangelicals. You've got the Protestants. You've got, the Shakers who handle snakes.
And Catholics.
I mean, you've got such a variety. Exactly.
Huge diversity, yes.
And so you can't really just say it's a Christian nation, because then the snake handlers are going to get annoyed when you don't have laws protecting them. And so it's not their brand of Christianity, therefore it doesn't count. And so it's going to be a huge infighting, even if we agree that it's Christian. Now, of course, that starts to discriminate and have problems against anyone who is not Christian.
And where does it end? Yeah.
Exactly, it's infringing on their rights.
How many Protestant sects are there, and how many, all the way down?
Yeah, and so it's basically just opening the door for any kind of bigotry and discrimination that you want. If you start saying that this is a Christian nation, we tolerate everybody, which is what most of them would agree to, that this is a Christian nation, but we don't mind other faiths here, where they're perfectly welcome to be here, but our government is Christian or whatever. But again, that just opens the door for Christianity, for any kind of discrimination. If I go into a courtroom that supports Christianity, I don't know if I'm going to be getting a completely fair trial if I have to walk in there, and because they're going to have the Ten Commandments, and I'm going to have to swear on the Bible, and all of these other little factors are going to go along, I have to go in there and stand myself up in front of everybody and say, I don't believe what everybody else here believes. I think you're all wrong. And I don't know if I'm really going to get a fair trial at that point.
That's right.
You're going to at least get some cross-eyed looks at you. And so unless you're openly saying that, yes, non-Christians shouldn't be allowed in this country, well, that's scary, but okay. But again, you're just opening the door for that. So.